Hello, everyone. Not sure if anyone's out there yet. Give it a few minutes for people to join in. Sorry, I'll look up. I've changed where my cameras are from my Music Man thing, so I have to make sure I remember. I'm here with Hannah, and feel free to comment and say hello if you're on. My name is Brian. This is part of our Stage 284 series, where we're presenting different things every day. And today's edition is sound design. What is a sound designer? Some of the things we do back behind the scenes, right? I've been the sound designer for most of the Stage 284 shows in the last number of years. And I do that sometimes while I'm acting and sometimes just independent of acting. Sometimes Hannah or myself are not even in the play. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Brian Dozer. This is Hannah, my daughter. And we do a lot with the Stage 284 here in town at the community house. And again, just trying to give it a minute for people to log in. If people are going to. I find sound fascinating. I've been doing music and audio since I was as young as I can remember. I remember being 10 years old and I was taking my radios apart and moving speakers around and blowing things up and having a good time. And I went to school for music production, and that's all this stuff like I will mostly be showing you today. And, how to make things in the studio. And I also had to play an instrument, so I played guitar, and my classical instrument was my voice. So I've been doing that for a number of years. And I was teaching music production for about 30 years. And I also worked for the company whom the software I'm going to be using today to show you some of this stuff. They were called Pro Tools. They still are called Pro Tools. And I was teaching simultaneously. So it's been part of my life, my entire, more of my life than not of my life has been music and music production. Everything's a little different when you look at the grand scheme of things. Music production has a certain set of rules. You're usually dealing with musicians, so you have drummers and bass players and all that. And television production is different. For when you do the audio part of it, you're more concerned that whatever you see on a picture, the voice, the audio and the sound are matching it. And then there's radio, which is a whole different thing. And that involves closer to elements of sound design where when you hear something on the radio, it should make you think of some image in your mind. And we get very used to some of the sounds that we hear in our minds that aren't actually real. When you watch a movie, for instance, we're used to a punch sounding a certain way. Well, if you punch something, it maybe makes that much noise. If you punch part of a body, it doesn't make any noise. So they actually add that in later. That's the sound design that they use in movies. And they'll do something like, I don't have one here, but they'll in a zombie movie, they'll take a hatchet to a watermelon, and it'll make a certain sound. Or they'll drop a watermelon if you're supposed to do something really gory and listen to that explode. Fire is paper crackling. So listen to this. Like, if you do that just kind of repeatedly, you close your eyes, you can kind of think of it as a fire. What other things? So I'll show you some things that I've done recently. I worked with Bobby Kerrigan on a production for Marblehead called Young Frankenstein, and sometimes it's simple when you're doing sound design is just finding a sound effect, and sometimes it's you have to build a sound because it doesn't quite match the mood that you're looking for. Here, I'll show you. I'm going to switch it over so Hannah can actually show you the image on the other camera. And I will make myself a little picture-in-picture here up in the corner. And see if you can zoom in. You want to zoom in over here and on this one.
I know.
So Hannah's going to help us out. And there we go. This is kind of a little shot of my studio here. Right. We're going transition now. So here I am, picture in picture, right? And what we have here is my computer. I have different things set up here. I've got just iTunes there in the front, which I'll hide for a minute. And I'll call up my main piece of software. I was hoping to do this all in the same thing, but we need to kind of show the camera for some of it because the computer that runs Pro Tools, I couldn't run the internet and do the live streaming on it at the same time. It would be a little too much of a load for it. So what we're showing here is Pro Tools. This is pretty much the standard software that's used for anything from music production to television production to sound design. And these are the waveforms. You've seen similar things by now, I'm sure, of all this. It's pretty common to see this, whether it's Logic or Nuendo or Cakewalk, or there's a lot of different programs. Even a GarageBand has this type of look. This is kind of the granddaddy of them all, the one that sets the standard. So hopefully you can hear pretty well. I've got some music I'm going to play right now. Let's see. I'll turn that up a little so we can hear it. So we needed all kinds of sound effects for Young Frankenstein. Sometimes it's the sound of this. Let's see if you can guess what this is. And feel free to type comments if you like, so we can see that you're out there and see what's going on. Let's see. That is the sound of a door scraping open. Do you hear it? Now, to get that, we had to listen to a variety of different doors. So we actually would search. I have a database here, and we could search for door. And all different kinds of doors show up. So I'm going to go look under 1003, number 17. I come over back to Pro Tools. I go to the workspace, it's called. And I'm going to look through. Doing all this in real time, of course. And we're looking through this library of sounds that I have that I've been lucky enough to be able to use. And they're escaping me right now. You see sound ideas? Oh, there it is. Oh, that's just the index. They're in here somewhere. I know it. Anyways, we'd look for the different sounds. I use a couple different libraries. One is called Sound Ideas. Another one's called Networks. These are sound libraries that were actually originally bought on CD, and I had to rip them over and put them in the hard drive. I might not see it. Oh, it's making me crazy.
Oh my god. Ooh, Nottingham.
I know I have Nottingham in here. We've done sound design for a lot of different shows. There it is. Sorry. So, to go back to the number that we had, I think it was 1,000. I have to remember the numbers each time. 1003, number 17. So I go to 1,000. I go down to 1003, and they're not in order for some reason.
It's the last one.
Yep, of course. And we go to track 17. Well, at least they're in reverse order, so that's easy enough. There's 17, and then I click on this little waveform on the right. I think Hannah's got it zoomed in a little bit. Just now you hear what? That's more like a barn door, it sounds like. Oh, we have applause. Thank you very much. And so maybe I got the numbers wrong. 1003. I think I went to 1007. That's the problem.
You went to 1003.
Did I?
Yeah.
There we go. Crazy, huh? So there's all these different sounds that we would find in there, and when we find the ones that kind of match what we want, we drag them into the main part of the program, so we get this right there. Now, you could say, well, this is too short for what I need. There's a way that we can just modify this so we can stretch it out a little. So I could pull like this, and it takes a few seconds to render it, and then... So I just made it like 30% longer just by doing a little button there. And maybe it's not the right pitch. So I can go up here to pitch shift, and I go to X form, it's called. And I can, let's see, we can preview this as it goes. You say, well, no, I want it really low and... Or maybe I need a real high squeak. And when I get it the way I want it, I hit render on this little plugin over here, over to the right, and it will change the sound of the main waveform on the screen. So try to keep, get your angle there. Yeah.
There's a glare on the screen.
So I know it's a little shaky and there's a little glare. Hang on.
I do not have the best sound.
Yeah, that'll help, I think. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them up on the screen. I know a couple of you are watching out there. Also, you know, the other part of sound design when we do these plays is dealing with our favorite things in the world, the lavaliers.
Oh, no.
For people who don't do a lot of theater, if you're watching, we now have wireless belt packs that everyone can wear that has a little microphone attached to it. And it's just a different element. I know this is what most people have dealt with. And certainly when they think of me, Mr. Dozer, they think of he's going to give us that lecture about the microphones again. But this is what we use in theater, as opposed to these big fancy mics like this one, which are you know, more set up for talking. You get close and you could talk. And I've got a few of them around here, and I've got, you know, you've seen some of the older ones like this. You couldn't really do this in theater. It wouldn't. Well, sometimes we've actually used this one for special effects before. When we need something that looks more old. That's from the 1950s. So we use these little lavalier microphones as what we have on stage. And it's usually important to kind of bring them up through and either bring them over your ear and tape them to your cheek, or sometimes if you have a decent head of hair, which I don't, you can actually hide them in your hair. This is what a lot of Broadway people do. And they use a smaller capsule even than this one, the end of the microphone. And they can hide it up in their hair. I think for Into the Woods, Ursina had a very tiny capsule, and we were able to hide it under her wig. It usually sounds better if it's up here. But because of all the costume changes and such, a lot of times we have to do it right here on the side of the cheek. And then we use the tape, which I know those of you who've been in shows are all big fans of the tape on your face. Yeah.
It doesn't hurt.
It can hurt over time, right? Especially if you're sweating. I think it's more the sweat and the glue of the tape don't get along too well sometimes. So that's one element of sound design. The other is, of course, you've seen us up in the balcony, is that we have the big mixer up there, and I have a digital version of what that is here on the screen. Well, it's a smaller version of it, so I'll add a few tracks so it looks like the fancier boards. So this would be a digital version of what we use at the community house at Stage 284, which happens to be a 40-channel board that we run there. And you've seen me with the iPad sometimes. There's a nice little iPad control over that, so I get to control the large board with the iPad. And I know it looks kind of confusing, especially when you haven't used it necessarily before, but each one of those channels is one of the actors wearing one of the microphones. and we first make sure that we can hear them and that the mic works. This happens to be one of the broken microphones that I have to fix. Yet they usually break either on the end here or the end here when they get yanked a little bit. Oh, really? Thank you for the... Amy says the live button is over there. I'm going to move. I'll move myself over to the right then. There, look at that. How's that? Fancy? Anyways, usually they break in one of these two spots. And we bring up each person on a separate channel, and then we make sure that everything's clearly heard. In theater, it's more important to be understood, I think, than it is to sound great. Like if I had, a fancy singing microphone, I'd have it in front of my face, and the mic is this close, and it sounds very big and full. But in theater, it's usually more important to hear things as opposed to making everyone sound perfect like they're singing through a big handheld microphone. And I think we do a pretty good job. We were very fortunate to be able to renovate the theater and get the new sound stuff going. So now we have and then we just recently got another gift to be able to get some really nice wireless mics, and that's been really helpful. I mean, it made my job a lot easier, because before I had to make up for the how big and reverb, how much decay was in the sound in the main hall, which made it really difficult to get people heard intelligently. So if you look on the ceiling now, there's all these baffles up there which dampen the sound and keep us nice and clearly heard. And that also allows us to move the band almost anywhere we want them now. Sometimes we do it in the fireplace room, and sometimes we do it, for Pippin, they were up on top of the stage, and for Legally Blonde, they were down in front of the stage. It gives us a lot more opportunities to move things around and work with the design of the set. So that's that's here. I have basically a digital version of that large console, and it also allows us to put in some effects should we need to. Like we can make the pitch changing that I showed you earlier with the other sounds that we were using, but it's not necessarily needed in most of our shows. I'm going to blow this waveform up so we can get a better view on the camera. And
that's cool.
Yeah, we can do things like visually. We can just stretch all this stuff out. There's different. Let's see. There's some music. We need some violin music. We were trying to find some eerie music that would go along with some of the things. I have boxes and boxes of these things. They're called music libraries. So they kind of look like this. And they, this one says Cosonus Arts, reflective and quirky variations. So sometimes it's, you can almost tell from the picture they put on the front. This is going to be something more noir-ish. There's all different. I literally have hundreds of these discs, and they're what they call music libraries, and you pull the music that you need from it. Or in the case of Young Frankenstein, we found a few things that worked for that right out of the sound effects libraries. Little horse. And we could say, I don't need it that long. I need it shorter, so I can grab something here and cut it and just pull the little piece out of it and just use that. A lot of little tricks that we could do in the studio to make things sound a certain way. Like I said, we could change pitch up and down. We could change the length of things. This is the sound of a carriage. We needed some horse clopping in the carriage. So I actually had to mix those two together to make the sound that we ended up with, because we needed the horses clopping and the carriage simultaneously. You know what that is? That, I believe, is a goose. bell. So all of these sounds come up separately on the screen, and we're able to manipulate them. With that, that's not. We were trying to find a decent doorbell, I think. That's an alarm clock. So every time I do a show or I work on a show, I create a whole different session for it, and I can show you some of the work I've done on some of the other ones. I could also show you some yeah. I'll show you a little music stuff too if you want. See, I just work with we did the play Salt and Stall. The Miriam Sear did some sound design for that. Needed some Indian drums, but we also wanted something that it's Salt and Stall's, had to deal with the witch trial, so we needed something a little eerie. So we kind of added these two together. So we add elements together to get the different effects that we're looking for. Let's see what we did over here. Oh, bats. We needed bats flying in a cave. And we needed many of them. And I only had a sound effect that had as hard as I tried. This is another great example of sometimes the sounds aren't really what they are. We tried all different types of birds. We tried crows and pigeons and eagles. And we could not get the sound of the bat the way we wanted until we went to the cartoon sound effect of a bat. And that's actually someone flapping their hands around. Play it again. They're flapping like a piece of fabric. And then they add in that sound. But that's not really the sound of a bat. But when we close our eyes, we want to hear something sometimes that's a little more obvious than the real sound. So some of the sound effects libraries I have were used in films. They have to be very realistic. They can't be over-exaggerated. If you ever see a bat flying, you don't hear their wings flapping up and down usually. But we want a visual, we want an audio that matches the visual that we imagine in our heads. The same for, like I said, with the punching. When someone punches, it's really usually the sound of a sack of flour being dropped on the floor. But when you put it together with the picture, you go, oh, wow, that kind of works. Let's see what else we had here. Another one where we had to build it. See more of that eerie music. And the drums. I think we did a few versions of that to make sure we had it the way we wanted. And then I was thinking if I could find it quickly, the Stiltkin show that we worked on way back when. We didn't have a ton of sound effects in it, but we did have...
Any radio.
Yeah. If I do it by letter, I'll find it. There it is. So, one of the Stage 284 productions we did was Stiltkin, which was Rumpelstiltskin's story. And we had, just a few things. Oh, it's loud, whatever that was.
It scared me.
Let's see, done. More eerie sound effects that were needed. And then there was an explosion at one point. I should turn it down because this may blow our... this may blow my... speakers out a little bit.
Huh.
Right here is a big... So we had to build a storm. And the sound of the storm took a few different elements added together. There's a lightning cracking, right?
I would love
And
to
then...
know.
But we wanted something a little more bigger. So there's another one. So you add the two together and you put them slightly different in time so that they go together. And then down here there's a purple track. That was Distant Thunder. So we add that one in, and then down here below is just a more regular thunder crack. So we have about 6 or 7 different elements to this one explosion or storm coming in. This probably would have worked for or would work for Secret Garden too. And I don't have it up super loud here, but if we had subwoofers, we'd hear this. Making a huge boom and just shaking the entire room. We have some other sounds we use. So everything had to be done by midnight. So the sound of the church bells. And let's see what we have here. Oh, we needed a mystical, magical sound. As Stiltskin does his transformation at the end. So we add the elements together, we mix them up, and sometimes it takes 2 or 3 things to join together to make a sound that we're looking for. So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see. And to be honest, that sometimes something works here because we're in a little studio room, and then we bring them to the large theater, and they don't necessarily sound the way that you're thinking they do when you're here. So sometimes you have to hear the sound in the environment it's in. Some of the bigger movie mixing studios that they do all the audio in, like Lucasfilm and I think it's Studio 4 in Toronto, they actually mix in a theater. They sit in the balcony and they listen to it as it actually plays out of the speakers in the theater. That way they know when you're in the theater it should sound accurate and correct. I think that's about it for today. I don't see any questions today, but I hope this has been fun for you. I'm sure the video will be up here if you want to watch it later. If you ever do have any questions, feel free to ask. I taught this this subject for 30 years, and it can be a lot more fun than it looks. Here I'll just go out by showing you some music production that we do. This is something an album I mixed last year. Here, and it's by a group, Ken Clark Organ Trio. He plays an old Hammond organ. And let's see. Try to find a nice, quieter one. Let's see. 46 is pretty good. And you'll see that all the waveforms and the elements are much more involved than trying to do sound design for the theater. You have to add a lot of things together. In fact, it's taking longer to open the program because there's that many more channels that are involved and that many more waveforms had to be added together.
What is that?
This little thing here in the middle of the screen. Let's see. Yep, that's called a plug-in. So it's an effect that in the old days it would be a big piece of equipment that would that you would have to run wires out to and back, and now everything's done in the computer. Most of the programs that are out there have plugins available. A GarageBand has plugins, but you have to kind of hopefully know some of the stuff behind the scenes to really get the plugins to work. But this is again a music recording. I actually recorded it here at my house, and I had the drums and the guitar player and everyone playing all at the same time. That's the organ. Now watch, I'm gonna solo. So for everything we're listening to, they were all split up into separate elements that had to be added up together. Like this purple track down here. Oh, got away from me. There it is. That's just the guitar. So in the room with the microphone right in front of the guitar, this is all we heard. A very good player. Mike Milley, his name is. But like the drums, it's just the kick drum there. There's an outside mic on the kick drum. Notice it's pretty much all you hear. You hear a little bit of something else, but mostly just the channel that we're listening to. This is the snare. I have it going through some effects, which I can turn off. These are called overheads. They're two mics that go above the drum kit. But we got some very good, what they call separation. It's nice that most of the sounds are what, you know, these are the overheads. You can hear a little bit of the organ bleeding in, but not too much. And this is the whole mix put back together. So just a little bit of what I do. I do a little bit of music mixing. I've done sound for video projects where we have to, you know, it's a concert and I have to clean up all the sounds and put it back together. So when they release the DVD, it sounds good. Hang on, I'm just going to go back to full screen and say a quick goodbye to everyone. Thank you guys for tuning in. Here we go. We're back to me and Hannah here. Hannah's arm was getting sore and her foot was falling asleep from holding it so much.
So bad.
But no questions. I understand it's not necessarily something everyone's into, but that's why sometimes if you see me standing around like this, I'm usually not thinking. I'm usually wondering about why it sounds a certain way and what we can do to fix it. I'm a fixer when it comes to audio and sound, and most everything else too. And you know, if we really need something high tech, we can always go to the Sesame Street record player, which actually has real records. And I was gonna start out with a joke where I was actually playing this and telling you what hi-fi really was, but let's see. It's being a little finicky. So thanks for checking in. It's nap time. Did you eat your lunch? Bye-bye. So tune in tomorrow. Let's see, who do we have coming up tomorrow? Do we know? Well, I don't have the screen up in front of me.
Isn't it Haley?
Oh, Haley was yesterday. I'm going to go back
Friday.
to 284 here and give you the lineup for tomorrow.
I think it's Friday.
We have something going on every day here at Stage 284. Of course, I only see my picture there on the screen, which is, of course, all we need. Well, oh, there it is. Let's see. Thursday, we have Haley coming up tomorrow with Ballroom
you.
Dance. She was correct. Hannah was correct. But thank you. And if you have a chance, tune in at 10 a.m. in the mornings. Hannah and I do a little preschool music show. And 4 in the afternoon today, which is Wednesday, we're going to be doing what we call the Big Kid Show. So thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate it. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Katie and Craig. And we miss all you guys at Stage 284. Definitely. Kathleen and the other Kathleen and yeah, Sarah. We miss all you guys, and we'll see you soon, okay? Bye-bye.